Hi, this is Margie Lavelle, and I'm here at IE Gallery. We're looking right now at Marc Aronson's paintings, mostly oil, on canvas or panel or sometimes linen. He uses an iridescent pigment as well to give a real glow to the pieces. And Marc is here today for his artist talk, and I'm going to introduce you to him. He came in from Orcas Island, which is his present home. He's lived in New York for 42 years, and he's back in Washington State with his family. And hi, Marc.
Hi, Margie.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good. It's a little wiggly while I sit down. So it's good to see you. So you were born in Seattle, is right?
Yes, I was.
Okay, and then I remember you did a little bit of studies as a child with calligraphy and went to some Cornish classes. And
I did.
And then eventually ended up in Bellingham at Western.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I started there, I think it was 1967.
Okay, and you got your BFA and...
BA.
Oh, BA, excuse me.
I never got the BFA. I don't think they offered it back then.
Yeah, they started to get rid of it in some schools, I remember. They offered it at Western, at University of Washington mid-70s, but yeah, so you got your BA, and then we're encouraged to, by a trusted friend and mentor, not to go to graduate school, but to go to New York and paint.
That is actually true.
And then you ended up in New York pretty much for about 42 years?
Yes, I did. Straight through for 42 years. From 1971 or 72, early 72, until 2014 is when we left New York.
Wow, and so you're back here, Washington State. That's a big change.
It really is. But we really love the change.
That's good.
At this point.
I'm going to ask you a question kind of off the cuff here, because now that I'm thinking of it, I was kind of blown away when I first saw your paintings when you came in to visit me that day.
Thank you.
And the lands, they're especially these are all from the last 3 or 4 years since you've been living on Orcas.
Yeah.
And they do have quite a landscape feel. Is that becoming stronger since you've been back in Washington State?
Yes, I think it has. There were some kind of more subtle landscape indications in those pure abstract paintings that I was doing in New York. In some cases, I would put a horizon or a wide swath of paint, or intentionally put the horizon in. But those paintings were primarily completely non-objective paintings. They came out here and decided that, the landscape is something I can use.
Yeah.
And combine the landscape, the essence of landscape, along with the abstract work, to kind of blend them, to merge them.
And they also reminded me, your older work, a little bit like color field as well sometimes.
Yes, very subdued color, but yeah.
Yeah. And so I was curious about also your gorgeous sense of light and the luminosity in your paintings.
Yeah.
Could you talk to us about, you also told me that you went through NYU, especially their Venice program, for quite a number of summers.
Yeah.
Maybe tell us a little bit about the light. It's incredible feeling that reminds me of Venice sometimes. And you also talked a little bit about the walls and the material in Venice itself.
Right.
Yeah.
So Venice is an incredibly beautiful city, and some of the other students, we would actually think of it as our own city. Although we only would spend 2 to 3 months there at a time, and in my case, I did this for 4 summers on my own, and then or with NYU, and then I went back to Venice on my own on a couple of occasions, not necessarily painting, but I experienced the city, and I've made a number of friends, Venetian friends, some of whom were teaching in the Venice program. So the light of Venice really became so interesting to me because it's everywhere. I mean, the light is in the air, the light is in the water and the light reflect on the buildings. And it's found in the glass. There's a lot of glass work, of course, very famous. And the glass windows also have this extraordinary light. And, you know, San Marco with the golden dome and so many other buildings that are truly incredibly beautiful, and the mosaics in these churches, it's all about the light. So,
do you mind if I ask too? Go and talk about, you talked to me once about the surfaces of the buildings,
yes.
The aging.
Yes, that's a very important thing to me. So, I used to walk around Venice everywhere I could that I thought was interesting, and some of the buildings, and I would say most of the ones that I became interested in were sort of like common residential buildings, some of which were commercial buildings, and I started really examining the walls of these buildings, and they're painted in lovely shades. I think I have a friend, Philip Sherrod, a painter, who told me about his feeling about these buildings and that they looked like sponge cake to him.
What was that word? They look like what?
They look like sponge cake.
Oh, sponge cake. Yes.
Yeah, and so, you know, I would photograph the exterior of these buildings and then kind of scrape away some of the plaster and just try to find out how this stuff was made. And I spoke to a few friends that I felt were knowledgeable about it. And they told me that the buildings, because of the canal water and the humidity, they absorb salt. And the salt is incorporated into the plaster. And that salt and the plaster, which is rather fragile, I mean, it's not a big deal to gouge out a piece of wall. It absorbs the salt and gives it this sort of sparkly, lovely light. So
That's beautiful. I can really see that in these pieces.
Yeah. So I became very enamored by that light, by those surfaces, and tried to incorporate them into the surfaces of my paintings.
And then you eventually, I'm curious to have you talk to us a little bit about Richard Diebenkorn, because I know you eventually did your PhD dissertation on Diebenkorn.
Yes, I did.
And people might not find that obvious a connection, but yeah.
Yeah, it's not a real obvious match, but I was always someone who was interested in him for some reason. And I think other artists had told me about him and thought that he was great, and in fact, he was great. Tony Berlant, one of his former students, told me that some of the professors at UCLA where he taught didn't respect him because he's such an iconoclast and he wouldn't go along with some of their ideas, like how they like to grade students, and that. But Tony told me Dick was a genius.
Yeah.
And you can see it in everything he did. Some of the things that he did that I love, and nobody really sees this very much. He did an entire series of paintings on this slick paper, very gestural, And the slick paper and the oil paint it allowed him to make these marks, very beautiful, elegant, almost calligraphic marks. And if you ever get a chance to see those, he made them in New Mexico for the most part, when he was a very young artist. Those were just stunning. But everything he ever did had a great finesse, and his use of color is beautiful. But with Diebenkorn and myself, in the Ocean Park work, the most famous work by Diebenkorn, I think there were 128 paintings from Ocean Park, but there are many drawings and prints, is how he developed the surface to create the light, which in very many ways I find relate to the Venetian walls and also what I was trying to do in my work. And so I saw this, I understood it, and I said, this is really something that I've been about for a long time. So after I presented this idea to my professors at NYU, they were like, yeah, this would be somebody who really relates to you, somebody with a strong affinity to what you do. So we would suggest that you do your study on him. Now, it's also very important for people to understand that I did not write a study on Diebenkorn as such. I wrote this study as a response to what I had learned about Diebenkorn, and then art that I made in response to what I had found when I studied him. So I produced work.
So your practice is a big part of this.
Yeah, I produced work in response to my understanding of Diebenkorn. And then I wrote about my own work, which most doctoral students never do.
Fascinating. Did you pick up certain techniques, habits that he used that you may not have been using otherwise? Like scraping, sanding?
Sanding came from me.
Uh-huh.
The sanding came from me. But the use of what historically is called essence, where it's very thin down oil. I love to use that. I also use more thickened oil paint, sometimes as thick as tomato soup. And I let the oil dry and then go back and then sand. Diebenkorn sort of like used the essence and scraped away and then developed it. But it's the surface development. The development of the surface mass, this constant accretive and decretive process that gets you that light.
And do you, I'm sorry, let me interrupt you once in a while. Do you use mostly, it looks like brush quite often?
Yeah. Yeah, I brush it or I knife it on, palette knife. But mostly brush, and then I'll go in and sand and then hit it again. And sometimes up to as many as 6 times.
When I'm looking at this one, I really can see that some similarities of you and Diebenkorn. I mean, really, you do use large swatches of color or large areas of color, but you get that luminous. Yeah.
And of course, the iridescent pigment really adds to that sense of light and depth and layering. And that's also, a very fascinating thing about Diebenkorn. He doesn't use anything but oil paint. And my God, is he able to
get that
so skillfully develop those thin layers and produce the light.
Yeah.
That fascinates me.
Yeah. Well, yours are, and I'm always impressed with your ability to do that too. I And then there's a little element in here I'm going to throw in about the addition of water as a resist,
Yeah.
which makes those beautiful little bubble type surface craters. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that's sort of a story that I feel I'm a little uncomfortable talking about.
Okay.
But what happened in Venice, there are many wild cats.
That's true.
And these cats, I used to paint in the courtyard of the Palazzo Penma in the Piazza San Giacomo dell'Orio, one of the oldest churches in Venice. And our school was the school was provided by the facility by the Architecture School of Venice, and so I didn't like painting indoors. I liked being in the back outside, and the gondolieri would drive by, they would float by, and I would love to hear their songs, their singing, and so I liked painting back there because that music was so warm and inviting.
Nice.
And so I painted back there, and then at night, I would just leave the pictures out there on my table. And my gosh, I came back one morning, and these cats had urinated on my picture. And I said, well, look, Mark, what are you going to do? You're going to scrape all that off and start again? Well, it was a tempting thing because, it's pretty funky.
Yeah.
But I just left it there and let it dry. And then I ended up seeing, all these craters, and that was interesting. So then, sort of happy accident, I just, I didn't try to get the cats not to do it, but when I finally got back to New York, I just used water. Because I really like that dimensionality of the craters. So that it's kind of a nasty story.
That's a good story. That's what we use. I mean, artists have a great way of using those kind of accidents.
Right.
Huh. Well, that's fascinating. I love hearing about Diebenkorn and his strict oil use. Is there anything else that you wanted to add here?
Yeah, I like that he was very, very sensitive to his environment. And I think that there's a story that William Bryce, who was a friend that he had known for many years and taught with at UCLA, and Bryce had Diebenkorn had gotten a new studio in Santa Monica, and Bryce went over to visit him, and he said, hey, look at these windows, they have this angularity, you can tilt them, and I think I see that in your work. And Diebenkorn said, yeah, you're right, I did use those windows in my paintings. And that didn't show up until he moved to his new place. So I guess I became aware of that, and then I began to understand how completely important it is the location where you paint, and that's I think why I got into these landscape pictures, because in New York it's just buildings, and there's a certain kind of light there. It's kind of like a basement. You're always down below these big buildings. And,
Nothing like Venice or here, where we have so much, even though there's a lot of water around New York, you have a lot of canyons of buildings,
So, so that was something, that was an awareness that came to me through my interview with William Bryce, who, I think when I talked to him, now 20 years ago, he was quite old at that time. I think he passed away, must have been 10 years ago. But talking about that idea of Diebenkorn being this iconoclast. He would just not adhere whatsoever to the way they wanted him to teach. And I think there was some guy, I can't remember his name, said, well, we're going to grade these students just the way we grade paintings when we go to a museum. Now, when you go to a museum, Dick, you grade these paintings, don't you? You give everybody, these pieces in museums, you give them an A, a B, and Diebenkorn just said, hell no, I don't do that. Who does that? That's what you do.
Yeah, we're talking about academics.
I look at the painting.
Informative and fascinating for me. So thank you so much. Unless you have something else to add.
No, I'm good, I think.
Okay.
I think we covered a lot.
Thanks so much for crossing the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Where are we crossing?
Sea.
The Salish Sea to come to IE today.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And thank you, Margie, so much for
it's a beautiful show.
this show.
And it'll be up for 2 more weeks. Once I'm going to try to send this out tonight or tomorrow, so for people to view. So thanks again, Mark.